The sun clung to the edge of the horizon like it didn't want to rise, casting a bruised amber light across the worn fences and cracked earth of Dunlow Ranch. Dust hung in the air like it, too, had grown tired of settling. Everything felt forgotten here, except the silence, and even that seemed to watch you. Clara stood just outside the main barn, her backpack slung loosely over one shoulder. She was 17, tall in a way that made her seem older, but she walked like someone waiting for permission to exist. Her long hair was tied back in a knot that hadn't seen a mirror in days, and her hands, shoved into the pockets of her oversized hoodie, were raw from helping her grandfather with feed buckets the night before. She hadn't said much since arriving at the ranch 5 days ago. She hadn't needed to. The loss followed her like a scent, faint but inescapable. Inside the barn, the horses shifted with the dawn. Hooves scraped against straw, and soft snorts echoed through the wood-beamed corridors. Most of them had settled in after feeding, but one stall at the far end trembled with unease. The mare inside was still wild at heart, even after weeks in captivity. Clara hadn't been introduced to her properly yet. No one had. They called her Sierra. Curiosity tugged at Clara's legs before her brain caught up. She moved slowly, boots silent against the straw. The smell of hay and sweat mixed with something sharper, like fear. When she reached the stall, she saw Sierra pacing, her muscular frame slick with sweat, flanks heaving. The mare's deep brown coat shimmered in the golden light, like a wet stone. Her eyes, wide, wild, unblinking, locked on Clara with a sharpness that should have sent the girl backing away. But she didn't. Something in those eyes wasn't wild, it was pleading. "Hey!" Clara whispered, stepping closer. Sierra didn't flinch, but her back legs buckled for a moment before she righted herself with a guttural snort. The straw behind her was soaked through, and her belly hung low, rippling in tight contractions. Clara's throat went dry. "You're in labor," she said under her breath, scanning the empty barn. There was no one around. No ranch hands. No Doc Harlan. No grandfather. Just her. Her heart thudded violently, then faster when Sierra let out a low, agonized groan and slammed her head into the stall wall. "Stop, no, don't do that," Clara said, more to herself than the horse. Her fingers trembled as she unlatched the stall door. It creaked open, louder than she'd hoped. The mare didn't charge. She watched. Clara stepped in, inch by inch. Her entire body told her this was stupid. Her legs, her lungs, her memory, they all screamed. The last time she tried to save something on her own, it had died. But her hands didn't shake when she reached for Sierra's neck. "You're not alone," she said softly. Something shifted in the mare. Not her muscles, her breathing. It slowed just slightly. Clara knelt beside her, knees pressed into the damp straw, her hoodie quickly soaking through. Sierra lay down, trembling, eyes rolling as another contraction gripped her. Time stretched and buckled. Clara didn't know what she was doing, not really. But instinct, buried under months of silence and sorrow, stirred awake. She checked for anything stuck, remembering the diagrams from her old vet science books, her mother's voice reading them aloud, her mother's laugh when Clara had declared she'd be the youngest horse surgeon in the world. That was before the accident. Another contraction hit. Sierra screamed, a horrible, wrenching sound that filled the barn. A small hoof emerged, slick and trembling, then another. Clara leaned in, breath shallow, encouraging, whispering nonsense that meant everything. "You've got this, you're almost there." Minutes bled by. Then the foal slipped free. A colt, slick and steaming, its tiny sides fluttering with breath. Clara wiped its nose with her sleeve, heart pounding in triumph. Sierra nuzzled him weakly, letting out a low, satisfied grunt. Clara smiled, small, real. And then Sierra screamed again. Clara froze. Another contraction? That couldn't be. Twin births in horses were rare and dangerous. She looked down. Another set of hooves. "No way," she whispered. She moved fast this time, heart now pulsing with fear. The second foal was lodged awkwardly, its angle wrong. She reached in, twisted gently, hands slick with fluid and shaking. Sierra moaned low and deep, her muscles quivering with fatigue. Clara's arms burned, but she didn't let go. "Come on," she begged. "Please." The second foal slid out with a gasp and thump. It was smaller, much smaller. Lighter, too. Clara stared. This one wasn't brown like the first. It was pale, almost silver. Its mane was near white, and it had unusual dark markings, spiraling faintly down its legs like ink in water. It didn't move. Panic slammed into her chest. No, 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 no. Clara rubbed its ribs, its legs, its face. Breathe. Please breathe. The tiny chest fluttered, then rose, then cried, high, sharp, like a bell through fog. Clara sobbed once, then bit it back. She wrapped both foals in dry straw, pulled blankets from the side rail, and curled up beside Sierra, who lay breathing raggedly, but at peace. The morning light spread slowly across the barn like spilled honey. Birds called outside. Somewhere a rooster crowed. The ranch began to stir, but inside the stall, time had folded into something quieter, something holy. Footsteps thundered down the corridor. Her grandfather appeared first, jaw set in alarm. Doc Harlan stumbled in behind, pulling on gloves. But both froze when they saw the scene before them. 2 foals, one of them glowing like moonlight. Clara didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Doc Harlan dropped his bag. In all my years, he whispered, stepping forward, I've never seen. The silver foal lifted its head. Eyes deep, strange, and 2 knowing met theirs. Something passed between the girl and the foal. A tether. A beginning. And Clara knew, whatever had just happened here, it was no ordinary birth. The silver foal stood on trembling legs, his movement stiff, unnatural, but determined. Clara watched from outside the stall, clutching the wooden gate, heart pounding in her throat. Every twitch of the colt's muscles felt like a miracle unraveling in slow motion. His coat, still damp, shimmered like ice under moonlight, though the sun was well up now. The other foal, a healthy chestnut, slept curled beside Sierra, but the pale one, he didn't rest. He paced. Doc Harlan rubbed his neck with calloused fingers and muttered, I've seen a lot of strange things, but this, I don't even know what to call it. Her grandfather remained silent. He leaned against a post, arms folded, eyes narrowed. He'd always been like that, stoic, unreadable. But Clara could feel the tension behind his gaze. It's like he doesn't know he's supposed to be weak, Harlan added. The birth should have killed him. Clara turned toward the vet. But he's not weak. He's just different. Harlan crouched near the foal, careful not to touch him. His legs are longer than they should be for his size. Joints don't sit right. And those eyes, did you see them? Clara nodded. She'd seen them. A kind of depth, as though something old had cracked its way through that fragile body. Her grandfather stepped forward. Let's not jump to conclusions. He might not make it through the week. Clara bristled. He's alive. That's what matters. They named him Echo, after much reluctant agreement. Clara's suggestion. It felt right. He moved like a whisper of something forgotten. Over the next few days, Echo's oddities became clearer. He avoided noise. He didn't cry out unless startled, and even then, it was a sharp, haunting sound that raised goosebumps on Clara's arms. He followed movement obsessively, watching other horses, birds, even shadows. At night, Clara sat beside his stall, scribbling notes in a tattered notebook she hadn't touched since her mother died. He never once took his eyes off her. Clara fed Sierra by hand. The mare's body was slowly recovering, but her spirit seemed dulled, always watching Echo with a protective, yet uncertain air. The chestnut foal was thriving, frolicking in the paddock during the day, already tugging playfully at Clara's shoelaces. But Echo was different. He stayed near Sierra, rarely ventured far, and sometimes refused to eat unless Clara was there. One afternoon, as storm clouds gathered in the distance, Clara slipped into the stall and sat cross-legged on the straw. Echo approached slowly, head tilted, legs still unsteady. I know, she whispered. I don't belong either. He sniffed her knee and lowered his head into her lap, eyes fluttering closed. Something in Clara broke quietly. She let her hand rest on his neck, fingers sinking into his strange, silky coat. Later that evening, Doc Harlan returned with blood test results. His brow furrowed as he scanned the paper, then again slower. Well, her grandfather asked. These markers, they shouldn't be here. Genetic traces from wild bloodlines we thought were extinct. Ghost herd DNA. Maybe from desert breeds nobody's seen in decades. This shouldn't be possible in captivity. Her grandfather stiffened. Meaning this foal is either a genetic fluke or a miracle, and people are going to want him. Clara stood straighter. He's not going anywhere. Harlan glanced at her with a sad smile. You don't get to decide that, sweetheart. She said nothing, but she knew. She'd seen the greed in people's eyes before, after her mother's death, when relatives had come sniffing for property and insurance papers. She wasn't going to let it happen again. Not to Echo. The storm broke just after midnight. Wind howled across the roof, and rain battered the windows. Clara couldn't sleep. She grabbed her coat and crept out to the barn with a flashlight in hand. The chestnut foal was asleep beside Sierra, but Echo wasn't in the stall. Panic surged. Echo, she called, her voice shaky. She turned, beam flickering across hay bales and shadows. There, in the center of the barn aisle, stood Echo, perfectly still, eyes gleaming in the dim light. What are you doing out here? He didn't move. Clara stepped closer, but slowly. The storm cracked outside. Echo flinched, legs buckling slightly, but he didn't fall. Instead, he mimicked her step, matching her stride, hoof for footfall. She halted. He halted. She turned in a small circle. So did he. Her breath caught in her throat. You're copying me. It wasn't random. It wasn't fear. It was learning. Echo wasn't just watching the world. He was studying it. She reached out a hand. He came forward and touched his nose to her palm, then stepped back again, as if completing the action. The barn lights flickered. In that moment, Clara realized this wasn't just about survival. Echo wasn't just different, he was exceptional. And if others found out, they'd strip him away from everything familiar. He'd become a lab subject, a commodity. Her heart swelled with the sudden weight of responsibility. The next morning, her grandfather found her asleep on a pile of hay. Echo curled at her feet like a dog. He said nothing, just stared. I won't let them take him, Clara said, voice flat from exhaustion. He sighed. If he can't walk properly by the end of the week, Harlan says he won't survive on his own. He will walk, she replied. I'll teach him. He raised an eyebrow. You're not a trainer. No, but I'm the only one he trusts. He nodded once, then left without another word. Outside, the storm had passed, but the air was still tense, like the world was holding its breath. Clara looked down at Echo. He stared up at her, blinking slowly, as if he already knew what came next. She gently lifted a lead rope, wrapped it softly around his chest. All right, miracle boy, she murmured, smiling through nerves. Let's see what you can do. The arena smelled of damp earth and old wood, and the morning sun cast long shadows across the rails. Clara stood alone at the edge, holding the lead rope loosely in her fingers. Echo stood beside her, alert but still. His coat had dried into a pale sheen, nearly silver under the rising light, with the faint spiral markings now more defined, like ancient calligraphy carved into his legs. He didn't tremble anymore. He observed. Clara's grandfather watched from a distance, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Doc Harlan stood near him, flipping through a clipboard without looking up. A few of the ranch hands leaned against the fence, whispering doubts. Clara heard them, even if she didn't acknowledge them. She'd spent every day since the storm walking Echo in the paddock, step by step, word by word, patience stitched into every movement. Now this was the test. You ready? She whispered. Echo blinked. Then he stepped forward, one slow, careful stride. The murmurs at the fence quieted. Clara walked ahead, her hand gentle on the rope. Echo followed, cautious but precise, his legs moving with newfound coordination. He wasn't flawless. He stumbled once, but he righted himself quickly, lifting his head like he knew eyes were on him. Easy, Clara murmured. One more lap. They walked the perimeter. Dust kicked up around their feet. Each time Clara shifted, Echo mirrored her. When she stopped, he stopped. When she turned, he turned. It wasn't just obedience, it was sync, like some quiet music only they could hear. Her grandfather finally spoke. That's not possible, he muttered. Not to anyone in particular. Doc Harlan stepped closer to the fence, scribbling something quickly. Clara ignored them. Her eyes were locked on Echo. She didn't need approval. She already knew. This wasn't luck. This was trust, earned through hours of silence and presence, not force. After the final lap, she led Echo to the center and removed the rope. For a moment, he stood still, blinking at the unfamiliar freedom. Then slowly he began to move. First a walk, then a trot, then a run. The crowd gasped. Echo galloped around the arena like he'd always belonged there. His stride, though still slightly offbeat, was powerful, fluid, hypnotic. Dust rose behind him in golden swirls. He wasn't broken. He was becoming. Clara's chest swelled. The air vibrated with quiet awe. Doc Harlan stepped back, visibly shaken. He shouldn't be able to move like that. Not with his structure. Clara turned to her grandfather. I told you. He's not a mistake. He didn't respond, but the tight line in his jaw softened. When Echo finally slowed and returned to Clara, she wrapped her arms around his neck. He pressed his head gently against her shoulder. From behind the fence, someone clapped. Then another. Soon, all of them were applauding, not just for the foal, but for the girl who brought him back from the edge. Later that afternoon, Clara sat alone beneath the old oak near the pasture, her fingers brushing against the torn edge of her notebook. The pages were filling again, observations, questions, sketches. Dreams she'd once buried now clawed their way back to the surface, becoming real. Her grandfather approached quietly, boots crunching through dry grass. He stood beside her, hands in his pockets, gaze on Echo grazing peacefully near the fence. You did good, he said, after a long pause. Clara glanced up. Thanks. He's something else. Not just rare, unique. I know. He looked at her. Others are going to want him. Her heart clenched. I won't let them take him. He nodded. I figured you'd say that. He dropped an envelope beside her. Inside were old documents, land deeds, breeding records, even her mother's scribbled notes from years ago. She used to sit right here, he said softly. Talked about starting a sanctuary someday. A place for horses no one wanted. Clara blinked, surprised. I didn't know. I didn't tell you. Didn't think it mattered anymore. He sighed. But maybe you can finish what you started. That night, the wind shifted. A dry, uneasy breeze moved across the ranch, stirring the grass in waves. Sierra stood near the fence, watching her foals sleep in the shelter of the barn. Clara was brushing her mane when the mare suddenly stiffened. Her eyes widened. Her legs wobbled. Sierra. Clara stepped back, alarm rising. The mare staggered, then crumpled to her side, legs twitching. Clara dropped the brush and knelt beside her. Hey, stay with me. Hey. Sierra's breaths came in short, erratic bursts. Sweat soaked her coat, and her flanks shuddered with every exhale. Doc Harlan arrived within minutes, still buttoning his coat. She's crashing, he said. Internal bleeding, maybe. Something didn't heal right. She was fine this morning. She was hiding it. Clara pressed her forehead to Sierra's. Don't leave them. Echo appeared at the barn door, wide-eyed and still. He took one hesitant step forward, then another. He didn't whinny. He didn't cry. He simply walked, slow and solemn, to Sierra's side. And then he did something no one expected. He lay down beside her, not like a frightened foal, like a guardian. His small body curled against hers, neck draped across her withers. Clara stared, unable to breathe. Sierra turned her head toward him. Her breathing calmed. Just a little. Her eyes fluttered. She's not going to make it, Harlan whispered. But she's at peace. The barn lights flickered again as the wind groaned through the rafters. Sierra took one final breath, and then went still. Echo didn't move. He stayed there, pressed against her side, eyes open and unblinking, as if holding vigil. Claire didn't cry. Not then. She reached out and rested her hand on Echo's back. The warmth was steady, alive. You're not alone, she said, her voice cracking. Outside, the night deepened, but inside the barn, two hearts beat on, and one of them had just begun. The sun crept over the hills with a soft orange hue, casting long shadows across the ranch. Dew shimmered on the fence posts, and birds sang like they hadn't known sorrow. But inside the barn, the world still felt suspended. Sierra's body had been gently removed hours before, and the straw where she died had been replaced. Yet the air held her memory, like a breath no one wanted to exhale. Clara sat beside Echo, her knees tucked against her chest, arms wrapped tightly around them. The colt hadn't moved much since the night before. He stood quietly near the gate, eyes duller, ears tilted toward every sound but reacting to none. The absence of Sierra echoed louder than any storm. "I'm still here," Clara whispered. "And so are you." She reached out, slowly, and touched his shoulder. Echo flinched, just a twitch, but didn't move away. Clara sighed and leaned against the stall wall, letting the silence grow thick between them. It was a silence that didn't ask for words. A silence she had once feared but now understood. It was the kind that held pain, yes, but also space, for healing, for reflection, for choosing what comes next. Her grandfather entered the barn just after dawn. He carried 2 mugs of coffee and placed one on the ground beside her. Clara took it without speaking. For a while, they just sat there, the old man watching the colt, the girl watching the light as it climbed across the beams. "He's going to change," her grandfather finally said. Clara looked up. "He already has. I mean, everything else will too." Word starting to spread. "About the foal. About what you did. I didn't do anything special. You saved him. You made him something people won't ignore." She frowned. "I didn't mean to make him famous." "I know." He sipped from his cup, eyes still fixed on the colt. "But now comes the part where you fight to keep him safe." The thought of losing Echo clawed at her. Offers had started trickling in. Phone calls from breeders, emails from research institutions. Some offered money. Others offered contracts, long-winded and polite, pretending they were doing her a favor. She didn't care. Echo was not for sale. Later that day, Clara led Echo into the pasture. He hesitated at the threshold, nostrils flaring as if testing the world for her scent. She gave him space, but stayed close enough for him to see her in the corner of his eye. The chestnut foal, whom they had named Rusty, galloped past them, kicking at the dirt, full of energy and oblivious to grief. Echo watched but didn't join. He stood still, legs rooted like the wind might blow him away if he shifted wrong. Clara sat on the edge of the water trough, watching him. "I used to think grief meant staying quiet," she said, voice low. "Like if I just didn't speak, didn't cry, maybe it wouldn't feel so big. But that's not how it works. It just finds other ways to grow." Echo turned his head toward her, ears pricked. "I see you," she continued. "I know what it's like to feel like your whole world disappeared overnight." As if understanding, Echo stepped forward, slowly at first, then with more certainty. When he reached her, he lowered his head, pressing it gently into her chest. Clara wrapped her arms around his neck, finally letting the tears fall. They soaked his mane, but he didn't move. He stood with her, solid and present, just as she had done for him so many times before. In the following weeks, the ranch transformed. Her grandfather cleared space for new pens. Clara spent every spare minute rebuilding the old shelter, reinforcing it for weather and wear. Doc Harlan visited twice a week now, not just to check on Echo, but to share what he discovered. "The foal's genome shows resilience we haven't seen in modern horses," he explained one afternoon. "Denser bones, higher oxygen efficiency, and his reflexes, off the charts. He's not just rare, he's evolution's answer to something we didn't know we were asking." Clara listened, half in awe, half in dread. What made Echo special also made him vulnerable. The world wouldn't stop chasing miracles, just because one girl asked it to. That's when she made her decision. She started a journal, public, online. She told Echo's story in her own words, posted pictures of him running, recovering, growing. She made it personal. Not scientific. Not for sale. Just real. And it worked. Instead of offers to buy him, she began receiving letters. From kids who had lost parents. From veterans with PTSD. From women who'd been told they were too broken to be anything again. They all saw something in Echo, a mirror, a metaphor, a hope. It was Claire's grandfather who finally said it aloud. "He's not a horse anymore. he told her one evening. He's a symbol, and you're the one holding the reins. One crisp morning, Clara climbed into the saddle for the first time. Echo had never been ridden before, but she didn't force it. She let him come to her. Let the moment arrive without pressure. He accepted her like it had always been meant to happen. The ride was slow, thoughtful. They circled the pasture, his gait surprisingly smooth, his instincts gentle. Clara leaned into him, feeling the rhythm, the heartbeat beneath her legs. She didn't steer. She simply trusted. At the top of the hill, she dismounted. The valley spread out below them, golden in the autumn sun. Echo turned his head, eyes scanning the horizon, nostrils flaring as if tasting the wind. "This was always yours," she whispered. He stepped forward, mane flicking in the breeze, then turned back to her, waiting. Clara smiled. She didn't need to run anymore. She didn't need to hide. Together, they descended the hill, side by side, not as girl and animal, but as something more, something whole. Because in saving Echo, Clara had found her own healing. In losing Sierra, she'd learned to carry love forward instead of letting it die. And in trusting again, she'd finally remembered who she was. As they passed beneath the oak where her mother once sat, Clara felt the weight of the past settle not as a burden, but as a root, a beginning. And far behind them, where the wind played gently through the trees, Sierra's spirit galloped free.